Madam Speaker, Honourable Premier in absentia, honourable members and guests, good afternoon. It has been one of the great joys of my life to have been involved intimately in education in the Eastern Province, both as a teacher, a researcher and a school principal for over 20 years. Madam Speaker, once again the dark cloud of potential under-expenditure hangs over the Department of Education, with projected figures at 960 million rand being underspent, with 538 million of that on goods and services, as at the 31st of December. Through you, Madam Speaker, the Honourable MEC must tell us if this is indeed the case, as the implications are huge. It is with a heavy heart that I compiled a report on the recent oversight visits to schools in conjunction with the Department of Education. I say this because the Department of Education, which should be the torchbearer of the dreams of our youth, has unfortunately become a department of failures, which has robbed our youth of both their dreams and their opportunities. I shall elucidate. Let us begin with the LTSM delivery. The failure of the department to deliver 42% of top-up textbooks to schools across this province, resulting in learners having to borrow books or simply go without for weeks and weeks of schooling, is damning. Hardest hit were the schools in the northern areas and townships of Nelson Mandela Bay, despite the Honourable MEC's commitment to prioritising these schools for the 2017 academic year. Even worse, officials within the department had misled the committee about textbook delivery status, claiming that indeed 100% of textbooks had been delivered. These officials show a blatant disregard for the fundamental rights of our children to learn, and an inherent disrespect for the leaders to whom they report. What remains to be seen is how the department intends acting against these officials. Too many times have we seen a slap on the wrist or a gentle sweeping of the incident under the collective comrades' carpet. This lack of discipline is a failure. A further cause for concern is the poor quality of LTSM materials being delivered to our learners and the exorbitant cost of this material to the taxpayer. How does the supplier pay for this stationery, and what are his or her profit margins? This would be worth a forensic investigation. Learners are given pencils that they cannot sharpen because all the lead inside them is broken. This is another failure. Let us move on to infrastructure. Shortages of schools. Schools with no fences that are exposed to vandalism. Schools that have not been maintained in up to 20 years. Schools that still have open pits for toilets. Schools that take turns to use a single classroom. The list is endless. But far worse than this, the list is old. Year after year, these infrastructural challenges have been reported, and over several years in some cases, but still nothing happens. And then money goes back to the Treasury. Another failure. There are two groups concerned with the improvement of education in our province: those who perform oversight and assist in making decisions, and those whose function it is to implement those decisions at the coalface. These two groups do not necessarily speak the same language. In the most recent House Resolutions report, page 21 refers, and I quote, "The committee has, on numerous occasions, found the situations in schools to be contrary to the claims of the department," close quote. What is the point then of having an oversight committee when the said committee is being misled by the people that it attempts to guide? If this system is based on misinformation, then this system is a failure, and infrastructure development will continue to flounder in our province. Another failure. I believe every person in this esteemed chamber today wants the same for all South African children. A quality education for every child, with at least part, if not all of it, in their own home language. A safe learning environment where children can learn, play, interact, and develop their social and sporting skills in the company of nurturing educators. Access to technology from as young as grade R, so that these children can develop more global understandings of their local contexts. And for those children with barriers to experience educational, academic, and occupational support in order to nurture their full potential. Madam Speaker, why should this fundamental right of every child be so difficult to achieve in the Eastern Cape Province? And what aggressive and fast-tracked changes can we make to achieve this elusive right? Honourable members, during the State of the Province address, we heard our Honourable Premier talking about radical socio-economic transformation being a key focus area going forward in order to stimulate the increasingly sluggish economic growth. But if we are to embark upon a journey that will bring lifelong and meaningful change, socio-economic change, we need to do it properly. There is no better starting point than ringing in radical change in education. The Democratic Alliance has an agenda to do just this. I wish to share 6 key areas. Firstly, invest far more in quality teacher training. Finland was a poor industro-agrarian society in the 1980s with a weak education system by European standards. In the early 90s, policymakers there introduced changes that have resulted in Finland having the most successful and inclusive education system in the world today. What did they do first? They invested in quality teacher education. Practice teaching is prioritized. Every school teacher has studied pedagogics and best teaching practice for a minimum of 5 years before they are allowed in the classroom, and they are supremely accomplished. The only institutions in this country that were comparable in terms of pedagogic teaching and understanding were our teacher training colleges, which were shut down in the 90s instead of being rolled out across our province and our country. At the end of the day, quality education requires quality educators. Secondly, we need to address teacher-to-pupil ratios to become relevant to the African context. It's all very well having fancy formulas, but they are not always relevant. There is very strong evidence, as quoted by the OECD, that lower teacher-learner ratios benefit learners from disadvantaged backgrounds. And these lower ratios allow greater flexibility for innovation in the classroom, as well as improved teacher morale and job satisfaction. Innovation, honourable members, is exactly what we need. Lower ratios also result in a shift away from procedural teaching to test teaching and towards high-quality conceptual teaching and understanding. Number 3, we need to get our learners online as young as possible. It is shocking that South Africa is one of the few countries in the world that has been unable to roll out free Wi-Fi to all their education facilities and libraries. Create techno-hubs for all learners and university students to access. The province will reap the economic benefits of having a #technosmart workforce in a few short years. Skills for a wide variety of jobs will have been created. Number 4, trim the administration. When somebody is incapable of performing the duties they have signed up to perform, their employment should be terminated. This is global practice. Redeployment simply burdens another department with incapacity. One does not continue employing more people to do less efficiently, until the organization is so bloated it cannot function effectively at all. Introduce competency testing for principals. We expect our principals to lead their respective schools and produce future leaders who are able to contribute to society. This is a huge responsibility and requires competent leadership. Successful principals must be incentivized. Developmental intervention can then address shortcomings. Admin and teaching staff should be assessed by external assessors, which will save precious time and cut the cost of cumbersome IQMS systems. And now lastly, for the elephant in the room, SARTU, through perverse protectionism of the worst type of teacher and the worst of education practices, has contributed substantially to tarnishing the reputation not only of the department, but of teaching as a profession. A principled union would strive to achieve exactly the opposite. Legislation needs to be promulgated that curbs the influence of unions on the decisions of policy makers in this profession. These key points, if implemented, would put our province on the road to education recovery, and that in return would begin the steady climb out of the economic doldrums we find ourselves in. This is exactly what the Democratic Alliance's Vision 2029 is all about. In 12 years from now, we could be celebrating the kind of education success that Finland enjoys today. There is already one lost generation in South Africa. We dare not lose another. Ndiyabulela.